Doug Kramer, 6th of July 1973 to December the 11th, 2023. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Many of you have enjoyed the collection of interviews and conversations that I had with Doug. We were due to have another lively Q&A session this coming Thursday. That will not happen, as Doug has died. This video isn't about my response to Doug's death. That I will provide separately, as I know many of you are interested, having asked me about it. First, some factual matters. Doug and I last spoke on the 24th of November after wrapping up an excellent Q&A session. We agreed that the viewers were most engaged. Doug continued to laugh in relation to certain of my responses, and we settled on doing it again on the 14th of December. We concluded that a trailer video should be created announcing the Q&A. On the 1st of December, I sent Doug the thumbnail for that video, which he received with his customary enthusiasm. That was our final exchange. No video was forthcoming from Doug, and therefore I chased him. Unusually for him, I received no reply. Around this time, I also received emails from viewers of both Doug's channel, Dazed But Not Confused, and my own channel, explaining that there was some concern that Doug could not be contacted. It then transpired that there was a growing concern for Doug's well-being. Doug's father died in March this year, and this had prompted contact between Doug and his mother. Doug was estranged from his parents as a consequence of their involvement in Scientology, something which Doug had escaped from. Doug and his mother were taking cautious steps in rebuilding their relationship and had agreed to meet in the new year, something which pleased Doug. A friend of Doug's, concerned by his absence, contacted Doug's mother on Sunday the 10th of December. His mother emailed and called Doug. He did not answer nor return her attempts to contact him. This was unusual practice for Doug. His mother was eventually able to persuade the police and landlord to perform a wellness check on Doug at his apartment. Doug was found dead in his bed. As some of you know, the LA County's coroner's office announced the cause of death as arteriosclerotic cardiovascular disease and noted cigarette use as a significant condition. Only in our last Q&A, I had chastised Doug for his smoking. Doug was born and raised in Ventura, California. He was an actor and a professional musician. His IMDb profile has him describing himself as an opportunist with a degenerate gambler edge and an affinity for the bizarre. Doug was a prolific YouTuber with his channel Dazed But Not Confused, where he spoke about his experiences with Scientology, which had led him to access my work about narcissism, which enabled him to make sense of so much of what had happened to him. Doug regularly spoke about his experience concerning Scientology on other channels and in digital media. It is as a consequence of what Doug has spoken about in relation to Scientology that many people are aware of him. He was around 9 years old when his father introduced the family to Scientology, and Doug found himself being gradually indoctrinated in his own right. Doug explained that he was a 100% dedicated Scientologist by the time he was around 19. Doug explained that being raised in a secret society was absolute madness. He said that it would drive you madder and madder the longer you stay in it, and the more you make it a part of your life. It wasn't until Doug was in his 30s that the light bulb moment finally came after a concerned friend dropped off a book called Combating Cult Mind Control on his doorstep one day. Doug explained it happened in one afternoon. There was no slow burn about it. Everything changed in January 2008. As Doug explained, it was a truly mind-blowing experience to suddenly realize that everything you believed in was false, and the dread and terror that set in was remarkable. Doug realized that he was in a dangerous position, and he began to worry about how he would get his parents out, and what this cult would do to him if he spoke out. He thought about that day of enlightenment a lot. He asked, would I have woken up from Scientology eventually if my friend hadn't dropped that book off? I really don't know. When Doug was a child, his father had stumbled upon a newspaper ad for Dianetics, the set of ideas practiced by followers of Scientology. Intrigued by its promise of improving communication skills, his dad went down to the local Scientologist mission that same day, where he was broken down by interrogation before returning home a completely different man. Doug explained, my dad was sold the communication course and started that day. He was also sold a package of what's called auditing, their version of psychotherapy, and it was expensive enough where he didn't have the money and ended up borrowing it from his brother. This need to borrow a large sum of money and the hypnotic state my dad came back to the house that day with created a palpable fear in my mother and myself. We didn't know what this strange new thing called Scientology was, or why he suddenly needed to do it, or he might have to get a divorce. Despite he and his mother feeling freaked out by his father's unnerving behaviour, his mother was eventually coaxed down to the same Scientology mission and went through the same process, before Doug later followed suit. He said it was a totally immersive experience that demanded complete obedience to the writings of L. Ron Hubbard. That's what happened to me, and I saw the same things happen to my mother and father and the other Scientologists I interacted with. It deletes empathy and emotions from you, where you end up a little robot without a heart or a conscience. A sociopath making machine is what I dubbed Scientology. Doug explained that Scientology ensnared artists in particular because they are the perfect mouthpiece, promotional piece for the cult. For instance, he explained that in relation to Tom Cruise, Cruise is successful and follows Scientology, therefore it has to be good. Don't you at least want to look into it before you dismiss it? That's the benefit that Scientology gets. What do aspiring artists get out of it, he asks. Certainty to all of life's answers and a way into the business, a support system, and protection provided by the cult should the artist run into any trouble. Eventually, Doug was able to leave, but it took him more than a decade of extreme emotional and life upheaval to unpack what had happened to him and start life over again from the ground up. Doug believed that he would be deprogramming for the rest of his life, and, at the time, he had no relationship with his parents until recently. He also explained that he hadn't experienced any retaliation from Scientologist leaders, and he wondered, though, if he continued to speak out about his experiences, whether that threat might grow. But ultimately, Doug was able to escape Scientology. Doug was an empathic man. He loved animals, especially dogs, and exhibited his innate kindness in his dealings with others. He made no demands of people, and was genuinely thrilled when engaging with others. Doug and I first started interacting back in 2020, and after the first interview, I explained that I would be pleased to speak to him again. He emailed me thus, "Really? You would come back on? I thought you were just being nice when you said that on Air HG. How on earth do you get so much done? Are there 5 HGs out there running around? My man, I would love to do a part 2, and 3, 4, 5 when you have the time. Could you do the same time next week, possibly? If not, literally any time works for me. Just pick a day, time, and I'm in. Can't say thank you enough, fine sir." That was at the start of the relationship that Doug and I had, exhibiting his kindness and his enthusiasm for working together. Doug and I interacted extensively through email and also speaking to one another, because we would often speak extensively both before and after our formal transmissions. What was clear about Doug was that notwithstanding what had happened to him, he was never self-pitying. He was never one for the sob story, not wanting to talk about himself in a way of eliciting sympathy, but simply telling you how it was. What mattered to him was understanding. He was a relaxed man who had a natural inquisitiveness allied with a respect for the experience of others. He saw it as axiomatic that other people needed to understand his experiences, not because he wished to preach at people, but because he wanted to help. Possessed of a great sense of humour, he engaged readily and easily with many. He had an almost childlike enthusiasm for the subjects which interested him, but alongside that, there was a sense for rejecting those that he now viewed as problematic, and doing so at an early juncture. No longer would he suffer those that sought to dupe him, a product no doubt manufactured in the foundry of his escape from Scientology. Doug was a warrior for the truth. It mattered to him. For too long the truth had been denied to him, and whilst he presented with a relaxed surfer vibe, this pursuit of the truth drove him in his daily dealings. Doug was a kind, inquisitive, accepting man. He remains in the many videos that he created with me and others. I encourage you to watch them by way of remembering Doug Scott Kramer, escapee, truth warrior, and the man who always referred to me as my friend. You've shuffled off this mortal coil, Doug, but you made your mark.